Brzezinka, Poland. The most terrible thing of all, somehow, was at Brzezinka. The sun was bright and warm. The rows of graceful poplars were lovely to look upon, and on the grass near the gates children played. It all seemed frighteningly wrong, as in a nightmare, that at Brzezinka the sun should ever shine, or that there should be light and greenness, and the sound of young laughter. It would be fitting if at Brzezinka the sun never shone, and the grass withered, because this is a place of unutterable terror. And yet every day, from all over the world, people come to Brzezinka, quite possibly the most grisly tourist center on earth. They come for a variety of reasons. To see if it really could have been true, to remind themselves not to forget, to pay homage to the dead by the simple act of looking upon their place of suffering. Brzezinka is a couple of miles from the better-known southern Polish town of Auschwitz. Auschwitz has about 12,000 inhabitants, is situated about 171 miles from Warsaw, and lies in a damp, marshy area at the eastern end of the pass called the Moravian Gate. Brzezinka and Auschwitz together form part of that minutely organized factory of torture and death that the Nazis called concentration slaughter Auschwitz. By now, 14 years after the last batch of prisoners was herded naked into the gas chambers by dogs and guards, the story of Auschwitz has been told a great many times. Some of the inmates have written of those memories of which sane men cannot conceive. Rudolf Franz Ferdinand Hess, the superintendent of the camp before he was executed, wrote his detailed memoirs of mass exterminations and the experiments on living bodies. 4 million people died here, the Poles say. And so there is no news to report about Auschwitz. There is merely the compulsion to write something about it, a compulsion that grows out of a restless feeling that to have visited Auschwitz and then turned away without having said or written anything would somehow be a most grievous act of discourtesy to those who died here. Brzezinka and Auschwitz are very quiet places now. The screams can no longer be heard. The tourist walks silently, quickly at first, to get it over with, and then, as his mind peoples the barracks, and the chambers, and the dungeons, and the flogging posts, he walks draggingly. The guide does not say much either, because there is nothing much for him to say after he has pointed. For every visitor, there is one particular bit of horror that he knows he will never forget. For some, it is seeing the rebuilt gas chamber at Auschwitz and being told that this is the small one. For others, it is the fact that at Brzezinka, in the ruins of the gas chambers and the crematoria that the Germans blew up when they retreated, there are daisies growing. There are visitors who gaze blankly at the gas chambers and the furnaces because their minds simply cannot encompass them, but stand shivering before the great mound of human hair behind the plate glass window, or the piles of baby shoes, or the bricked cells where men were sentenced to death by suffocation and were walled up. One visitor opened his mouth in a silent scream simply at the sight of the boxes, the great stretches of 3-tiered wooden boxes in the women's barracks. They're about 6 feet wide, 3 feet high, and into them 5 to 10 prisoners were shoved for the night. The guide walks quickly through the barracks. Nothing more to see here. A brick building where sterilization experiments were carried out on the women prisoners. The guide tries the door. It's locked. The visitor is grateful that he does not have to go in, and then flushes with shame. A long corridor where rows of faces stare from the walls. Thousands of pictures. The photographs of prisoners. They're all dead now, the men and women who stood before the cameras, and they all know they were going to die. They all stare blank-faced, but one picture, in the middle of a row, seizes the eyes and wrenches the mind. A girl, 22 years old, plumply, pretty, blonde. She is smiling gently as a sweet, treasured thought. What was the thought that passed through her young mind and is now her memorial? On the wall of the dead at Auschwitz. Into the suffocation dungeons, the visitor is taken for a moment and feels himself strangling. Another visitor goes in, stumbles out, and crosses herself. There is no place to pray at Auschwitz. The visitors look pleadingly at each other and then to the guide. Enough. There is nothing new to report about Auschwitz. It is a sunny day and the streets were green. and the gates the children played.